My parents always told me that you need to maintain good relations with your neighbors and not quarrel with them once again. It was easy for me because I was a friendly and sociable guy. But because of a good relationship, I missed a very important detail, because of which my life collapsed and now I look at the neighbors more closely. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror, adjusting my tie and ensuring it sat snugly around my neck. With a smile, I checked my teeth for any remnants of food, keen to present a flawless appearance. Addressing my reflection, I remarked, "Jeff, you're looking fantastic." Satisfied with my own wit, I stepped back, collected my wallet, watch, and a fresh handkerchief, and then made my way downstairs to the kitchen, feeling as prepared as I could be. The aroma of coffee greeted me as I entered the kitchen, prompting me to reach for a cup from the small rack on the counter. Ah, coffee smells wonderful. I definitely need a cup before tackling this task. The task at hand was a meeting I dreaded with a vendor I strongly disliked, but it was unavoidable. Thankfully, it was scheduled first thing, so the remainder of the day should be bearable. While I didn't loathe my job, it had become monotonous, and I yearned for a change. If nothing changed soon, I was determined to take matters into my own hands. I was conversing with Essie, my wife of 19 years, and the love of my life. Technically, her name was Contessa, but everyone affectionately referred to her as Essie. It originated from her younger sister's inability to pronounce her full name correctly, resulting in Essie sticking. Our son Philip recently departed for college, leaving our home empty, a situation commonly termed as an empty nest, though the reasoning behind that term eluded me. After all, Essie and I still remained, and we held significance, or so I believed. Yet, who truly comprehended the quirks of colloquial expressions used when words failed? Turning my focus to my reserved wife, I inquired, "Do you have any plans for today? I should be back on time, and I was thinking perhaps we could dine out tonight. It would spare you from having to cook, and it's been a while since we've done that. It might be enjoyable." I proposed the idea, half expecting her customary rejection. She responded, "No, I don't have any concrete plans, but I might go shopping, explore some stores, or something similar. As for dinner, I'll pass. I'll likely be too exhausted anyway. I'll just order some takeout instead." I glanced at her, unsurprised by her response. She wasn't even meeting my gaze, likely hadn't been since I entered the room or initiated the conversation. It had been quite some time since she had paid me any attention, longer than I could recall. "Well, I didn't anticipate you'd be up for it, but I thought I'd ask. Takeout works." "You've really mastered that," I remarked, dripping with sarcasm and spite, though acknowledging the truth in her culinary skills. I felt confident making such remarks, knowing she wouldn't bother with more than a disinterested word or two in response. And as expected, she simply glanced up briefly, before returning to her indifference, fitting perfectly into the established pattern of our interactions, one that had been in place long before today, long before Philip left for college, and certainly unrelated to the empty nest syndrome Art, my friend and amateur therapist, insisted was the root cause. Essie had undergone significant changes in a relatively short span. Short, considering the 19 years of our happy marriage, preceded by a year of courtship. We had once been a unified team, sharing dreams and plans openly. However, about a year ago, things began to shift, and the transformation grew more pronounced with time. The Essie I had married was slowly becoming a stranger within our own home, and the sense of loss was tearing me apart. The crux of the issue lay in her denial and refusal to address it. Indeed, many things had changed recently. Previously, she used to accompany Phil to the gym when he was around, but he mentioned that she had ceased doing so several months prior to his departure. Although she still appeared fit and toned, it was becoming evident that she was beginning to gain weight around the waist, with a slight protrusion of a tummy. It wasn't significant enough to diminish her attractiveness, but it signaled a shift. Furthermore, she had started to display irritability and snappiness towards me. While not overtly significant, our conversations often ended with her making subtle jabs about my habits or work schedule, suggesting my hours were too long or that I traveled excessively, despite the fact that I rarely worked overtime anymore and hadn't traveled in 7 months. The Essie I knew would have discussed any issues before resorting to such behavior. Her demeanor had changed drastically, affecting our interactions with others. Despite being just 42, she looked younger, while I, nearing 49, made efforts to stay in shape for her. We used to pride ourselves on appearing younger than our ages, especially when we went out together, but it had been nearly a year since that had happened. Without any apparent reason, she consistently refused to accompany me, and I stopped asking about it months ago. The sarcastic tone in her remarks about dinner plans tonight and her automatic response went unnoticed by her, reflecting the current state of our relationship. Naturally, as a man, I couldn't help but notice that our once vibrant love life had dwindled away to nothing. We used to share an active and diverse sexual relationship, satisfying each other's desires completely. We were attuned to each other's preferences, ensuring mutual satisfaction. But everything changed. Despite my inquiries, pleas, and efforts to understand why she no longer desired intimacy, her response was merely a shrug, citing menopause and perpetual fatigue. She resisted seeking help and grew irritated when I persisted. In my masculinity, I opted to let it go, hoping it would resolve itself with time. As I sat across from my wife, these thoughts weighed heavily on my mind. Finishing my coffee, I cleaned my cup and placed it in the sink. Grabbing my briefcase by the door, I glanced back at her, motionless at the table, and uttered, "I'll see you tonight." There was no reply. I stepped out of the door and headed towards my car, burdened by the weight of the world on my shoulders. Oh, how I had cherished that woman throughout my adult life. How I had yearned to grow old alongside her, fulfilling all the dreams and aspirations we had shared in our youth, the adventures we imagined, the places we longed to explore. It wasn't even a year ago when she had discussed the possibility of us relocating to Florida if I secured the promotion to regional VP. It remained a viable option. She despised living in the Midwest, where winters were harsh and summers lacked warmth. The cold was her nemesis. Despite my lingering depression, I entered my office and flicked on the lights. Settling behind my desk, I powered up my computer and waited. I poured myself a cup of office coffee, snagged a donut from the communal box, and returned to check my email. As I nibbled on a coffee-soaked piece of donut, I opened a message from my boss, urging me to promptly visit his office. I smirked at the familiarity of the summons. TJ and I shared a long history, both of us starting at Edmunds Manufacturing around the same time. Now he held the position of Senior VP of Design and Implementation, while I served as a Senior Manager in Research and Design. After polishing off the donut, I wiped my face clean and strolled down the corridor towards his corner office. Along the way, I exchanged a greeting with Art Malone, my close friend and confidant, as I passed by his desk. A brief exchange, a promise to catch up later, and then onward to TJ's office. Pausing to chat with Maureen, his secretary, she directed me to go straight in. He was expecting me. Little did I know, that meeting would alter the course of my life, for better and for worse. He announced that I had been promoted to Vice President of Design for the Southeast region. Soon I'd be relocating to Miami once I delegated my responsibilities and wrapped up ongoing projects. The move could be completed in less than a month. Finally, I had attained the coveted position I had longed for. Essie and I could settle in Miami, enjoying the perks of a comfortable home, possibly one by the shore with a boat slip and a spacious sailboat, perhaps even motorized. After informing Art, coordinating with my second-in-command, and outlining the status of ongoing projects for closure or handover, I realized it was well past lunchtime. Sending everyone out for lunch, I took a moment to call home, eager to share the news with Essie. However, after dialing her number, I was met with only her answering machine. Opting not to leave a message, I attempted her cell next, but it too went straight to voicemail. Assuming she was with Jane, as she mentioned, I decided to head home early, intending to persuade her to join me for a celebratory dinner. Surely this occasion warranted a special meal. En route, I stopped by the florist to pick up 24 long-stemmed roses in her favorite color, pink, along with a large box of chocolates filled with nuts, also her preferred choice. I had the card printed with the message, "We've finally secured the transfer to our dream location. I love you, Jeff." I drove home the entire way with a tune on my lips, A goofy smile plastered across my face. I felt ecstatic, like I was on cloud nine. Finally, our dreams were turning into reality. A fresh start and a new life awaited us in Miami. Essie would transform, returning to her live-lie self, and we could embark on this journey together. We'd be a team again, just like old times, before things started to change with her. I pushed aside that thought. Today marked a new beginning. Nothing could stand in our way now. Pulling into the driveway much faster than usual, I narrowly avoided slamming into the garage door. I needed to calm down. Happiness was overwhelming me. Everything was falling into place perfectly. That reminded me to grab the roses from the back seat, along with the candy and the card, before heading inside. I entered the room, setting down my keys before carrying the flowers and candy into the living area, intending to surprise Essie upon her return. Approaching the couch, where I planned to place the gifts, I halted abruptly at the unexpected scene unfolding before me. My body froze as I witnessed Essie, her blouse undone and skirt hiked up, seated on the couch with Bill Parker, our neighbor and former friend, positioned between her legs. His arms supported her thighs, facilitating his intimate advances towards her. In a sudden moment of clarity, every detail of the room, their positions, the discarded panties, and Parker's disheveled state became painfully clear, etching itself into my memory indefinitely. Unaware of my presence, they persisted in their actions. Essie's moans encouraged Parker, who with one hand pleasured himself while attending to her desires. It became evident that this wasn't their first encounter, as Parker seemed well versed in Essie's preferences, a knowledge I once possessed. It appeared I had been replaced. I remained in place for another 20 seconds or so until clarity returned. The initial shock and revulsion at what I was witnessing gave way to a chilling anger. Though my first instinct was to retaliate violently against both parties, it wasn't in my nature. As that impulse subsided, a plan formed in my mind. Still clutching the flowers, candy, and card, I entered the room, maneuvering around the couch until I stood before Essie, who was positioned behind Bill Parker's exposed rear. With determination, I delivered a forceful kick to his bare backside, prompting him to cease his actions and glance over his shoulder with a simple, "Oh shit!" Essie's eyes snapped open, meeting mine with a mixture of alarm and recognition. The lust in her gaze waned, replaced by widening eyes that seemed on the verge of bulging from their sockets. She shook her head vigorously, repeating, "No, no, no," in a panicked mantra. Realizing her predicament, she attempted to push Bill away, while he simultaneously attempted to retreat, resulting in him awkwardly seated on the floor in front of me, nearly landing on my shoes. As she gazed at me, tears filling her eyes and her lips quivering with shame, she struggled to adjust her skirt and fasten her blouse, a challenging task with both hands occupied. I observed, my disgust evident on my face. However, as she met my gaze again, attempting to speak, my disgust waned, replaced by the agony of witnessing the deterioration of my world. I experienced betrayal, loss, anger, and ultimately pain, realizing it was over. I had lost her irreversibly, with no path to reconciliation. I resolved to end it then and there. I grabbed the 24 long-stemmed roses from their vase and hurled them at her, watching as they struck her face before cascading onto the couch and floor. The vase followed, crashing against the wall behind her. Next, I emptied the box of chocolates onto the floor and tossed the card onto the couch's edge. "Now I comprehend why you're always too exhausted to join me for dinner or make love. It's clear to me now." I turned to Bill Parker, who was struggling to pull up his pants and put on his shoes. I waited until he straightened himself up. Then I unleashed all the anger I had been feeling, hitting him squarely in the face. I felt a grim satisfaction as blood spurted from his mouth and he collapsed once more. As he struggled to rise on his arms, I addressed him directly. "I don't know how you plan to account for this to your wife after I inform her about your afternoon escapades with my soon-to-be ex-wife, but you better be ready to explain. Now get the hell out of my house before I physically remove you." I uttered no further words, but ascended the stairs to retrieve a suitcase and commence packing. Despite still seething with anger, it gradually waned, replaced by a profound, agonizing ache. The shattering of all my beliefs became almost unbearable. The ascent from the exhilaration of my promotion, followed by the plummet into the deepest depression of my life, left my legs unsteady. Almost unpacking, the intensity became overwhelming, halting me abruptly. Collapsing to my knees on the bedroom floor, I wept as I hadn't since my mother's passing. Allowing the emotions to flow, I realized there was little I could do to stem them. I waited until they subsided, leaving me hollow. I sensed her embrace, holding me tightly with her cheek against my head, murmuring apologies as if I were an infant. "I'm so sorry, Jeff. I'm so sorry." Her words momentarily ceased my tears, reigniting my anger undeterred. Swallowing hard, I let the fury build until it blazed brightly once more. It suppressed the pain, compelling it to relinquish its grip on me. "Remove your vile hands from me. Get away from me. Your scent of sex sickens me." I stood, my legs still trembling but gaining strength, and shut the suitcase. Glancing around, I spotted Essie on her knees, her face twisted in shock, tears streaming down. Despite her sobbing, I paid her no mind. Heading to the bathroom, I fetched my shaving kit containing my razor, toothbrush, and various travel essentials. Tossing them into a plastic bag, I returned to grab my suitcase. Ignoring Essie blocking the doorway, I hurled the bag and suitcase down the stairs without a second thought. Returning inside, I hastily gathered a few items from my bedside table before descending the stairs to retrieve my belongings. As I stepped out the door, I could hear Essie's desperate pleas for me to halt, to turn back and engage in conversation, but I was determined to leave that place behind. It was in that moment that I realized my marriage had reached its end, and perhaps I even felt a slight sense of relief that the inevitable had finally arrived. Over the past year, everything had been leading to this moment, and now it was time to acknowledge that it was over. The constant criticism, avoidance, disregard for my needs, and the utter lack of respect I had endured had ceased. Miami beckoned, and I was embarking on this journey alone. When I left an envelope for Bill's wife. Joyce needs to know the truth about her husband, and I think I did the right thing. After getting a new job, a new place to call home, and the freedom to spend the rest of my life with someone who would appreciate me for who I am, I decided to leave the past behind without looking back.
For quite some time now, I've been experiencing feelings of depression and anxiety. A part of it stems from knowing that Philip will soon be off to college, leaving me alone for most of the day. Another part arises from entering that phase in a woman's life preceding menopause, where doubts about youth, beauty, and vitality begin to surface. My world has revolved around Jeff, Philip, our home, and ensuring their comfort and safety for so long that the thought of losing it all fills me with dread. Above all, I've been feeling inexplicably odd lately. It's a sensation I can't quite pinpoint, something I couldn't articulate to a doctor. It's just a pervasive sense that something isn't right. I feel disconnected from myself, and it's starting to concern me. I've been hesitant to confide in Jeff about it because I know he'll want to intervene and find a solution. Being a man, he tends to approach problems with a fix-it mentality. But I don't want things to be fixed. I just want to be left alone to tend to my own needs. Nothing needs fixing. I just need space to navigate this on my own. He had previously discussed with me my reluctance to socialize or engage in activities, as well as the decline of our intimate relationship, which I currently had little to no interest in, though I couldn't pinpoint why. I used to enjoy being intimate with my husband, and there was no apparent reason for this change. I simply lacked the energy to engage in it now, but I believed this would eventually change. Time would heal, and I would return to my previous state. I just needed time. Despite his disbelief, I was aware of how terribly I was neglecting him. He made efforts to spend time together, suggesting dinners, outings, or activities, but none of his suggestions sparked any interest within me. Eventually, I grew weary of his attempts and began responding with hostility, saying hurtful things that I later regretted but never apologized for. Gradually, I started to detach myself, disregarding my husband's pleas, and often neglecting my son as well. As time passed, the situation deteriorated further, but by then, it was too late for me to reverse it. At first, I wasn't aware of it, but the start of my decline had begun. I started neglecting my gym sessions with Philip, as I doubted I would continue once he departed. Truth be told, I didn't derive much enjoyment from it, but Philip cherished the way it made him feel and wished the same for me. Despite appreciating his enthusiasm, I never fully embraced it like he did. Gradually, I began to skip more and more sessions. However, it was mere coincidence that events unfolded just after I resolved to quit. Although I lost interest in working out with my son, I found solace in the attention from other men at the gym. However, it wasn't for any reason other than to boost my self-esteem. Their significance to me didn't extend beyond that, particularly not in a romantic sense. I wasn't even sexually attracted to my husband, so the likelihood of being aroused by someone else, especially a stranger, was slim. I remained disinterested until Bill Parker started frequenting the gym more often. Bill, our neighbor from next door, lived with his wife Joyce, who was a recluse, bordering on agoraphobia. Initially, she only ventured out when absolutely necessary, occasionally attending parties, but preferring to host gatherings at home. Despite invitations from others, she declined without offering excuses. Bill attempted to persuade her to seek treatment, but she adamantly refused to leave the house, barely engaging with anyone beyond phone conversations, which she quickly discontinued. Consequently, she became increasingly housebound. Like many of his friends, I had stopped visiting Joyce, feeling burdened by her issues and uneasy in her presence. Was I much of a friend after all? Bill, who was a decade or more my senior, owned a small hardware store in our town. However, when Joyce fell ill and began to stay home, he made the decision to sell his store in order to be close to her. Having shared over 30 years with her, he felt it his obligation to support her. Despite his efforts, her condition deteriorated, and eventually, she seldom left the house except for medical appointments or emergencies. Eventually, she stopped leaving altogether. During our breaks at the gym, Bill and I started conversing, and I gained insight into his and Joyce's situation. Although I expressed regret for not visiting Joyce more often, Bill simply nodded in understanding. As he shared their story, I couldn't help but empathize with him, witnessing the sadness that weighed on him. Though I yearned to assist him, all I could offer was a listening ear. My sympathy for him grew as he spoke, yet I felt powerless to alter their circumstances. I found Bill to be an appealing individual, and upon closer observation, I noticed he had a well-proportioned physique with a toned stomach. I must admit, I couldn't help but notice a distinct outline in the snug gym shorts he wore. Particularly intriguing was how it seemed to become more pronounced during our conversation. This sparked thoughts that had been absent for some time. However, these thoughts vanished when Bill was out of sight. Evenings with my husband failed to reignite them. They only stirred when I encountered Bill again at the gym. This prompted contemplation. During our next encounter, while observing Phil's workout, I mustered the courage to inquire about Bill's relationship with Joyce. He appeared initially uncomfortable, but eventually confided that their romantic life had dwindled. Joyce showed no interest and rejected his advances, becoming hostile if he persisted. He had resigned himself to this reality, no longer regarding her as a true partner, but felt compelled to remain by her side due to her poor health and dependency, especially given their past love. That evening at home, I came to a decision. I realized how I could assist Bill while also addressing my own needs. It became crystal clear in my mind. If only Bill could stir those emotions within me, and if he was trapped in a marriage with a distant spouse, then I could aid both of us simultaneously. It seemed so straightforward. My plan was to offer intimacy to Bill, fulfilling his desires as well as mine, since I found no arousal with my husband, and he couldn't fulfill his cravings with his wife. It appeared to be the perfect solution to our dilemmas. I saw it as a clear and simple solution at that point in my life. At no point did I perceive my actions as betraying my husband. I couldn't find fulfillment with him, and he couldn't meet my needs. Therefore, I believed that by engaging in this arrangement, I could potentially reignite my own desires, which might positively impact our marriage bed. Wouldn't that be beneficial for Jeff? Bill could find satisfaction with my companionship, which would be beneficial for him. And judging by the way his pants bulged when we interacted, I anticipated finding satisfaction myself. It appeared to be a mutually beneficial arrangement. With that realization, my decision was made. The next day, I headed to the gym with Philip, and to my surprise, Bill was already there. I observed him working out, admiring the way his body glistened with sweat. I found myself longing to touch his gleaming muscles and feel the firmness beneath his shorts, stirring feelings I hadn't experienced in months, maybe even years. I was aroused. Just watching Bill's physique was turning me on. It affirmed that I had made the right choice. After his workout, I spoke with Bill and shared my decision. He listened attentively, his mouth forming a broad smile, and he even blushed. He seemed genuinely appreciative and confessed that he had wanted to make a move on me for months, but was hesitant, fearing it could jeopardize our friendship. Although he had some reservations about doing this behind Jeff's back, I explained our lack of intimacy, which he seemed to understand. In truth, Bill would have agreed to anything just to be intimate with me. I recognized that. Bill was undeniably masculine. We arranged our first meeting at my house. Bill planned to inform Joyce that he needed to leave for a while, then drive around the block, park discreetly, and enter through the back gate. Once inside the yard, he would be out of sight, and no one would pay him any mind. With Jeff at work as usual, and Philip away on a trip with his senior class, I would have the house to myself. That morning, I waited in the kitchen, keeping an eye on the backyard until I spotted him arriving. He swiftly closed the gate and hurried towards the back door. Holding it open, I welcomed him in as he entered without hesitation. It wasn't until he halted and turned that he noticed I was only wearing a robe. With a grin, I stood there as he caught his breath, then casually untied the belt, allowing the robe to fall open. Beneath, I was completely nude, having freshly shaved. While I usually maintained this grooming habit, there had been some neglect lately. But not today. He emitted a groan, almost a gasp, as his gaze traversed my exposed body. I found myself aroused by his admiration, so I shrugged off the robe, letting it drop to the floor. Standing naked before him, I felt no shame or remorse as he devoured me with his eyes. He was my neighbor and Jeff's friend, but in that moment there was only raw desire between us. He did not take long to wait before coming up to me, pulling me to him and kissing me forcefully. His assertiveness increased my excitement. I greeted his tongue as it intertwined with mine, feeling the heat rise inside me. When his hand wrapped tightly around me and slid his finger inside, I was taken aback, doubting my decision for the first time. But all doubts disappeared when he added another finger, pushing vigorously. I enjoyed it almost instantly, feeling my legs give way under me. When I came to, Bill had already undressed and was guiding me to the counter. I couldn't resist when he lifted me up, his arms supporting my naked body. I was on the verge of losing consciousness from intense pleasure when I felt him stop his movements. We descended from our peak together, both completely exhausted and satisfied. When Bill gently lowered my body back down, I let my legs relax and sink to the floor. I stepped back to get to the bathroom. Bill watched me leave, his own pants lying on the floor nearby. When I returned to the room, I found Bill already dressed and sitting at the table, looking at me warily. I smiled, went over to give him a peck on the cheek, and sat down opposite him. "Thanks, Bill. It exceeded my expectations. You were great, and I really liked it. I hope this is just the beginning of our mutually beneficial agreement." "No, thanks, Essie. I never expected this. I have never experienced such intense pleasure. You're an amazing partner, and I agree that we should do it again. Could we possibly do it again tomorrow, at the same time? I believe that we can. Phil will be at school, and next time we can go upstairs to the bedroom." This meeting was too hasty, but it was still wonderful. I think we'll be more comfortable in bed. We can take the time to get to know each other better and find ways to make each other happy. That marked the outset of our affair, which persisted almost daily until the culmination of the school term. Subsequently, we became more cautious, and the frequency dwindled until we rendezvoused once or twice a week, sometimes even less. Despite this, Bill remained an exceptional lover, and I relished our time together. The predicament arose when none of my experiences with Bill translated into my relationship with my husband. I harbored no inclination to engage in intimacy with him, and I justified my actions as permissible. Though I acknowledged my distorted thinking, I remained indifferent. I was unwilling to relinquish Bill and unmotivated to pursue intimacy with my husband, Jeff. In fact, I grew resentful towards Jeff for his inability to arouse me like Bill did. I was certain I didn't love Bill, and the prospect of cohabiting with him never crossed my mind. My affection for Jeff, however, took me by surprise, a realization that dawned upon me too late. Despite this, I held on to the assurance that I had Jeff's love to fall back on, providing me with a sense of security. It's curious how I never doubted that aspect. The notion of losing my husband never even registered as a concern. When the summer came to an end, Philip left for college, while Jeff continued to work as usual, giving Bill and me more opportunities for intimate meetings. Despite the gradual deterioration of my relationship with Bill, we continued to meet as often as possible. Our meetings often involved mutual oral pleasure, as the effort to have full-fledged sexual intercourse seemed unworthy of our time. I particularly liked the way Bill gave me pleasure, often allowing him to continue for as long as he wished. Nevertheless, he seemed satisfied that he was giving me pleasure, and I agreed to it. That's exactly what we were doing when Jeff suddenly walked in on us. Looking back, I feel it so vividly, as if it happened just an hour ago. I was sitting on the couch in the living room, my blouse unbuttoned, while Bill caressed my breasts. Then he pushed me back, knelt down and lifted my skirt, exposing me. Taking off his trousers and my panties, he triumphantly held them up, smiling at me. Smiling back, I spread my legs to give him access when he started giving me pleasure. Enjoying the sensations, I let my body respond, knowing that the climax was still some time away. Just as I was beginning to feel a surge of desire, Bill suddenly pulled away. When I opened my eyes, I was met not with lust, but with the gaze of my husband Jeff, who was standing there. Looking back now, certain moments stand out vividly in my memory. The initial gaze into his eyes revealed a mix of disgust and anger. However, as time passed, I witnessed a transformation within him. Gradually, the anger gave way to something else, something familiar yet heartbreaking. Pain, intertwined with sorrow. It was a feeling I had encountered before with Jeff, but this time it cut deeper. Witnessing his agony, knowing I was its cause, inflicted a pain unlike any other I had experienced, not even comparable to the loss of my parents in a tragic accident. That haunting look, etched in my memory, will linger in my dreams indefinitely. Yet, as distressing as that moment was, it paled in comparison to what followed shortly after. Bill hastily dressed and fled from the house, muttering a brief apology. Watching him leave, blood staining his chin, I realized that for the first time in nearly a year, I felt nothing for him. His fate no longer concerned me as I ascended the stairs to find Jeff. At that moment, I couldn't fully comprehend the gravity of the situation or how drastically my life would soon change. All I knew was that I had to confront my husband and attempt to explain. I entered the bedroom and froze in utter disbelief. My beloved husband, the man I adored with all my being, the one who provided a secure, affectionate haven for me and our son, was kneeling on the floor, his head buried in his hands, tears streaming down his face, his heart shattered. It felt as if my own heart stopped beating in that moment. All I could think of was wishing for God to take me away, to spare me from witnessing the pain I had inflicted upon my husband. The realization of what I had done to him crushed me. Without hesitation, I approached him, knelt behind him, and enveloped him in my arms. I held him tightly, murmuring reassurances that everything would eventually be all right. I needed him to hear my apology, to understand my remorse. "I'm so sorry, Jeff. I'm so sorry," I repeated, hoping he would feel my sincerity amidst his anguish. My only intention was to offer solace, to express my love for him as a devoted wife. But he pushed me away. He forcefully distanced himself from me, as if my touch repulsed him. His anger was palpable, and his words cut deep, haunting my thoughts long after. "Take your filthy hands off me, and get away from me. You stink of sex and you make me sick." They say your life flashes before your eyes when you're faced with death. Perhaps that's true, for in that moment, it felt like a part of me died too. Not my entire life, just the fragments of joy I shared with Jeff. Our life together, our home, the precious moments as a family, the dreams we held dear for our future, our plans for retirement, everything we cherished, everything we built together, all perished that day. And a piece of me perished alongside them. Today finds me seated in a modest apartment I rent on a monthly basis. Financially, I could afford something grander ever since Jeff left me well off, but I lack the desire for such extravagance. Before me lay the conclusive divorce papers, signaling the permanent end of my marriage. Jeff has moved forward with his life, now residing in Miami, a city we once dreamed of together. Though it feels like an eternity ago, it's only been about a year. I stumbled upon the note he left the day he departed, its words echoing the gravity of my loss. It was a simple note. Our dream destination. I love you, Jeff. My apathy and disinterest have returned, momentarily quelled by my betrayal of my husband and then by my futile efforts to salvage our marriage. I fought earnestly, but Jeff's refusal to engage in dialogue or comprehend my actions hindered any progress. Eventually, I came to realize that the why was inconsequential, particularly to Jeff. What could I possibly say to him? I had betrayed him repeatedly, even after my attempts to reignite our love had faded. It was acceptable to deceive myself, but I couldn't deceive him. Not after what I had done. At first, our son Philip was outraged by my actions, but in the end, he forgave me. He represents my only connection to my past life, living with a man who adored me and whom I loved dearly in return. The sudden disappearance of this passion remains a mystery to me. Despite countless attempts, I can't figure out why it faded away. However, it seems useless to dwell on this now, because it is too late to change the course of events. My current existence reflects the emptiness that has reigned since Jeff's departure. I remain motionless, absorbed in thoughts of my loss. Bill, whom I used to see regularly, has now disappeared from my life, not only because I have no desire to reunite with him, but also because his wife kicked him out of the house. I was left alone with my memories. First of all, I remember the mood I had when I started my affair with Bill. At the time, my motives seemed straightforward and attractive. I imagined the potential benefits and pleasures, weighed the pros and cons, but never thought about the consequences of my actions. The possibility that things would go awry never crossed my mind. I focused solely on what I could gain, not paying attention to what I could lose. Indeed, the consequences are inexorable. That's the end of the story. Write your opinion in the comments about this story. It will be interesting for us to read it. Also, do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel so as not to miss new, equally interesting and exciting stories. Good luck!